Hello and welcome to part 2 of urinary system anatomy. In this lecture, we're going to begin by talking about some of the functions of the urinary system, and then we'll discuss the renal blood vessels in more detail. So the primary function of the urinary system, which you already probably know, is the production of urine and its elimination from the body. During urine production, the kidneys perform the following functions. Number 1, they remove nitrogen waste. Number 2, they regulate water levels in the body. And number 3, they regulate the acid-base balance and electrolyte levels of our blood. Now, you don't need to write this next part down. This is just kind of for you to understand what the kidneys are doing. So nitrogen waste products such as urea and creatinine are formed during the normal metabolism or breakdown of proteins in our body. Buildup of these nitrogen waste products in the blood can result in a condition called uremia. And again, that indicates that those kidneys aren't functioning properly. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the renal blood vessels. Large blood vessels are needed to handle the vast quantities of blood that flow throughout the kidneys daily. When we are at rest, about 25% of the blood pumped from the heart with each beat passes through the kidneys. That's a lot. Arterial blood is received by the kidneys directly from the abdominal aorta, which you can see here, via the left and right renal arteries. Okay, again, indicated in red. So again, blood is received to the kidneys from the abdominal aorta via the renal arteries. Each renal artery branches and rebranches until a vast capillary network is formed within each kidney. Because most of the blood volume that enters the kidneys is returned to the circulatory system, the renal veins must be very large vessels. The renal veins connect directly to the inferior vena cava to return the blood to the right side of the heart, and you can see that is in blue. The renal veins are anterior to the renal arteries. So the renal arteries bring blood to the kidneys, the renal veins take blood away. Along the medial border of each kidney is a centrally located area called the hilum. And we're familiar with that term because of the hilum in the lungs. The hilum in the kidney serves to transmit the renal artery, the renal vein, lymph vessels, nerves, and the ureter. So again, it's kind of that central area in the kidney where all the important things kind of come and go, just like in the lungs. Each kidney is generally divided into an upper part and a lower part, and so we would call that the upper pole and the lower pole. All right, let's talk about urine production for a minute. The average water intake for humans during a 24-hour period is approximately 2.5 liters. This water comes from drinking liquids, of course, from foods we eat, and from the end products of metabolism. This 2.5 liters of water eventually ends up in the bloodstream, and vast quantities of blood are filtered through the kidneys. In fact, at rest, more than 1 liter of blood flows through each kidney every 60 seconds, which results in the removal of about 180 liters of filtrate from the blood every 24 hours. The kidneys are very busy filtering our blood. More than 99% of this filtrate volume is actually reabsorbed by the kidneys and returned to the bloodstream via the renal veins. During the reabsorption process, blood pH and quantities of various electrolytes such as sodium, potassium, and chloride are all regulated. Again, so the kidneys are filtering and regulating all these waste products in our blood, keeping us healthy. From the large amount of blood that flows through the kidneys each day, An average of approximately 1.5 liters of urine is formed. That's about 1,500 milliliters. This amount varies greatly, of course, depending on how much water you drink, how much you perspire, and other factors. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the structure of the kidney itself. The outer covering of the kidney is termed the renal capsule or the fibrous capsule, and you can see that here. Directly under the renal capsule, surrounding each kidney, is the cortex. And the cortex forms the peripheral or outer portion of each kidney. Under the cortex is the internal structures called the medulla. So this whole region here is called the medulla. And within the medulla, there are approximately 8 to 18 cone-shaped masses called the renal pyramids. And that is what you see here. Each one of these is a renal pyramid. This part of the kidney is called the medulla. Remember, outside the medulla is called the cortex, and then the fibrous capsule is on the outside of the cortex, kind of surrounds the whole kidney. Now, the cortex periodically dips between the pyramids to form the renal columns, which you see here, and those extend all the way into the renal sinuses, which you see here. So pyramid, column, sinus. Pyramid, column, sinus. Okay? Now, please note, figure 14.1 is labeled incorrectly in your textbook. I have fixed this diagram, so this diagram is correct. In your textbook, column and sinus are transposed. So please note, my diagram here is correct. The renal pyramids are primarily a collection of tubules that converge at an opening called the renal papilla. Okay, so again, the pyramids are a collection of tubules that end in the papilla. And the papilla is the apex of the pyramid. Remember, it's the part that comes to a point. This renal papilla drains into a minor calyx. So here's a minor calyx, here's a minor calyx, here you can see one is labeled for you here. So the pyramid comes to a point at the papilla, which then drains into the calyx, the minor calyx. Calyces, plural, appear as hollowed out flattened tubes. And really think of them as like a funnel. They are collecting the waste products that's passing through the pyramids. There are about 4 to 13 minor calyces in the kidney, and they unite to form 2 to 3 major calyces. So notice where 2 minor calyces meet, that forms a major calyce. Okay, and you can see that here. So 2 minor are meeting to form a major. The major calyces unite to form the renal pelvis, and that is this area here. The renal pelvis appears in the shape of a larger flattened funnel. So each expanded renal pelvis narrows and continues as a ureter. Thus, urine, which is formed in the microscopic or nephron portion of the kidney, way up here, and we'll talk about that more next, finally reaches the ureter by passing through the various collecting tubules in the pyramids, a minor calyce, a major, and then finally to the renal pelvis and down the ureter. So there's a term I want you to know. It's called renal parenchyma. And this term is used to describe the total functional portion of the kidney. And those are the functional portion of the kidney is what we're looking at when we do a contrast study called an IVU. An IVU is a procedure where we visualize the kidneys with contrast in them, and we're trying to take pictures of the contrast in the renal parenchyma. And of course, we'll talk about that more in lab. So we're going to pause part 2 here. We'll pick up part 3 with the discussion of the nephron.